Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. As we take today to focus on violent crime here in Indianapolis, Mayor Joe Hogsett laid out his new plan this week. $150 million from the Biden American Rescue Plan to be spent over 3 years. The money will go for public safety upgrades, hiring 100 new IMPD officers, and expanded group violence intervention programs. Now the mayor is defending his plan one-on-one with News 8's Alexis Rogers.
Your first year in office, Indianapolis had about 150 criminal homicides, then 155, 158, 154, then last year, 215. And that's on pace for even more this year. We've had that conversation before. Are you certain that that number will continue to drop, especially as we're talking about all this money being spent?
Well, certainly the $150 million 3-year commitment that we're making to public safety, I am confident will reverse those numbers. And the reason I have confidence, and the reason why I want your viewers to have confidence, is the numbers that you just identified, which were accurate, which showed a decidedly lower number of gun violence or of homicides in those years, 2016 to 2019. We were implementing programming to try to keep those numbers down or as low as we could. As you just identified, 2019, the numbers actually did go down. And so what that tells me that what we were doing over the course of those 4 years was having an appreciable effect on at least keeping the numbers at a reasonably steady level. A lot of what our budget is suggesting is let's recapture the successful aspects of those programs and scale them to levels never seen before. This may very well be a once-in-a-generation opportunity to transform the public health and safety of our city.
So I think the intention is understood. I know that you've explained this plan plenty of times. I would love to have a very honest conversation about the checks and balances. I've been going to a lot of different community meetings, a lot of neighborhood meetings, and folks are saying, look, we understand that the pandemic had a big role in this, but a lot of this was a problem well before the pandemic. Where are the checks and balances when these programs are not working year after year and we still have babies dying? How do you have those conversations with groups like that?
Well, let me respectfully take issue with your premise. The plain fact is, in the city of Indianapolis, we have seen, unfortunately, an increase in the level of gun violence for 10 years or more. So these are not issues of recency. And the part of the premise that I take issue with is that I truly believe the numbers bear out that the efforts we were making in 2016, 17, 18, and 19 were paying enormous dividends in at least keeping the overall level of gun violence at a reasonably steady pace, with the hope that it would then turn, which in 2019 we did see a slight, albeit slight, reduction in the overall number of homicides. What has happened, and what your viewers need to appreciate and understand, and I think that they have lived it in their own way, a radical retransformation of the way life is lived, not just in Indianapolis, because I know you've heard me say this before, but it bears re-emphasizing. This is not an Indianapolis alone problem. This is a challenge that every major urban community in the country is facing. Unprecedented levels of gun violence, non-fatal shootings, and homicides.
You know, the different shootings that are happening, how it's impacting kids. You probably do remember this. I know you have a lot on your plate, but the little boy, this probably was like maybe a month or two ago, that got shot at his grandparents' house early in the morning from a drive-by shooting. And one of the community leaders, Antonio Patton, had a very impassioned speech, if you will, about people just being sick and tired of being sick and tired, and him saying, I've talked to this family, they don't want vengeance. They want justice, and they want people to take responsibility. When you have these kitchen table conversations, what is your responsibility in all this, past the numbers and past some of the, intentions? Where do you see your responsibility in all of this?
Well, I think as mayor and as the leader of our city, it is profoundly and deeply saddening to me whenever there's loss of life at frankly whatever age, particularly young life, when really they had a situation of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. That seems to me profoundly morally unjust. But any loss of life is unacceptable. And we've been seeing too much of it. We all have responsibility. We all have a role to play in helping make our community safer. Ultimately, a lot of that leadership falls on me as the elected mayor. A lot of it, people in our community look to Chief Randall Taylor and the brave 1,670 sworn police officers of IMPD. But the truth is also, it can't be just us alone who reverses this trend. We need people in our community to do as you reported, and that is not focus so much on vengeance, but focus on justice. Well, what does that mean? That means people willing to stand up in our community and tell us what they know, tell us what they've seen, tell us what they've heard. It's that kind of collective community effort that I think will go a long way toward bringing to justice those who choose to use firearms in ways that are completely unacceptable.
I'm happy that you brought that up, because another criticism that we've heard is that Marion County's criminal justice system is a revolving door for suspects. Is the system too easy on offenders? Is a question that we get a lot.
Yeah, and my answer to that is we work very closely with the Marion County courts system. We work closely with the Marion County prosecutor's office, and we provide whatever assistance that they deem that the administration could and should participate in providing. But at the end of the day, I really don't run the court systems. That's done by the judges. I don't make the decisions regarding bail and release and the like. And so we try to provide whatever support they want.
When it comes to donating money to groups that use it to bail offenders out of the Marion County Jail, is that the right use of taxpayer dollars?
Yeah, I think that the amount of money that we do allocate for neighborhood-based criminal prevention efforts is warranted. So those decisions are made by the CICF, not made by the mayor's office. And by the way, I'm not here to throw CICF under the bus. I mean, it's just that they are the ones who make those decisions. We provide the money, and it's just not my opinion that the way to remedy some of these tragic mistakes is to cut and penalize neighborhood groups that otherwise might be doing a wonderful job of preventing crime in their neighborhood.
All right, coming up, Mayor Joe Hogsett talks the city's response to the downtown riots and the persistent rumors that IMPD officers were ordered to stand down. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics on this Sunday as we return to our one-on-one conversation with Indianapolis Mayor Joe Hogsett. It's our first real chance to sit down with him since the riots in downtown Indianapolis last year. The 2 nights of violence left downtown scarred for months. Alexis Rogers asked him about the role in those riots.
A big part of this unsafe, uneasy feeling for some of our residents, started within the riots in downtown Indianapolis of May of last year. Criticism of that night has included some of the same themes that we've heard when it comes to the violent surge and the leadership of the city. Where were you on that night when a lot of the riots started to happen? I
was at home monitoring what was going on, in constant contact with the leadership at the Emergency Operations Center. I came downtown the very first light of day the next morning, I met with community leaders and organizers of the protests for the better part of that Saturday after the Friday night of discontent, and then held several press conferences, one on Saturday, one on Sunday, one on Monday, to try to update the people of the city of Indianapolis as to what had happened, what the city was doing in response. I hope that I was very real and present in these difficult days. They were difficult, but here's the good news. As difficult as that weekend was, a Friday and a Saturday night, where constitutionally protected protests over the untimely death of George Floyd, we have had, over the course of the last year and a half, over 150 peaceful protests in the city of Indianapolis. And I think that speaks more volumes about the way the city of Indianapolis. So look, I mean, again, Indianapolis was not the only community that suffered greatly as the result of protests that were taking into account the tragedy of George Floyd's death. I am proud to say that since those two nights, not only has Indianapolis experienced, I think, the beginning of a renaissance, with March Madness being held entirely in our city, with the return of the Indianapolis 500, with our convention and exposition business starting to be rekindled. I think downtown is on the upswing, coming back, and I think good days are ahead.
You've been really big on clear communication. When it comes to, folks still asking questions about that time, did the city give any stand-down order that night for officers to not react or not crack down on rioters or protesters?
No, I believe all those decisions regarding the tactics and the strategy that was employed by our ERG unit in IMPD, those decisions were made by the command staff of IMPD itself. And I support their decision making, but to the extent that certain people choose to believe that somehow there was some political involvement, I'm not a law enforcement professional from a standpoint of a police person. And so I asked the chief and his command staff what they recommended. It was implemented. The plans were changed a little bit over the course of the weekend. I did issue a curfew on Sunday of that weekend, and I do think it had a positive effect.
All right, coming up, the political fight over masks in public and in schools. Our Wish TV political experts are up next to talk about it. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome back Republican Jennifer Hallowell and Democrat Brian Gaddy. Good to see you both. Let's start with the infrastructure bill, guys, that passed the Senate this week. Senator Todd Young voted against it after originally announcing his endorsement for the framework of the plan. Jennifer, I'll start with you, being that you're the Republican on this panel. How is this not a flip-flop?
Well, because he's been consistent from the very beginning that he was concerned about how it was going to be funded, and he wanted to make sure that it could be fully funded. He said that at the very outset. And then, look, I mean, he wanted to get to a place to be supportive and was a good faith negotiator along the process. But then when the Congressional Budget Office came out with the score and the price tag of $250 billion being added to the deficit, it's clearly not funded, and he was not in a position to be able to support it.
Brian, your response on the senator's stance?
Well, Senator Young didn't seem to have any problem with supporting the Donald Trump tax cuts, which blew a hole in the deficit and added trillions to our national debt. Not to mention that his minority leader, Senator McConnell, along with 17 other Republicans, supported the infrastructure package. So that's the second time in a row he hasn't voted with Hoosiers. He voted against the American Rescue Plan. He voted against actually the $1,400 stimulus checks, and now he's voted against this. So obviously he's standing with his donors. He's not standing with Hoosiers.
So Brian, does this give Democrats, in your opinion, any hope at all for a Senate run in 2022?
I think it does. I mean, Senator Young is not standing with working class Hoosiers. He's not standing with middle class Hoosiers. He's standing with his donors, and he's listening to the Washington establishment of the Republican Party. He's not listening to Hoosiers, and I think that makes him vulnerable. Like I said, he voted against the American Job Rescue Plan. He voted against the $1,400 stimulus checks, and now he's voted against the infrastructure plan. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to improve the infrastructure of the great state of Indiana, and Senator Young has voted against it. So yes, he's definitely vulnerable, and I think he can be defeated because of it.
Jennifer, your response on that? Is he vulnerable?
No, I don't think he is. I mean, I think he's been an incredible leader in the Senate. And I think what Brian's talking about is Democrats, not Hoosiers. The majority of Hoosiers care about the debt that we are leaving to future generations. They care about spending plans being accounted for. And again, back to my point, I think Senator Young would love to be in a place where we could fund some of the items of this if they're fully funded. But that's not what this ended up being.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even have a candidate yet, Brian, to her point. Are we going to have any news on that anytime soon?
I think we will. I think there are Democrats that are looking at running for the U.S. Senate on our side. But the fact is, getting back to Senator Young, he voted against the infrastructure package, and he knows how that would be able to benefit the great state of Indiana, Hoosiers. And the problem with Republicans is they always seem to worry about deficit spending and the debt when there's a Democrat in the White House. But when they're in the White House, they don't seem to have that problem. Profligate spending, spending out of control, that seems not to be a problem. And then also voting for tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires, that also adds to our debt. So it only seems to be a problem when there's a Democrat in the White House.
Right. To Brian's point, Jennifer, I mean, a lot of money has been spent over the past 5 years now, including during the Trump administration.
Sure. And I mean, and part of that, which also received some Democrat support, is because we needed to kickstart the economy, which we did. And we had a booming economy during the Trump administration. So, I mean, I think that, again, all of this is consistent. And if Democrats thought that Senator Young was so vulnerable, you think that they would have a strong candidate out there who's put some sort of a campaign together by now, but they haven't.
I want to move on here because we only have about 2 minutes left. Let's move on to talk about COVID-19 because states around the country beginning to mandate masks again, specifically when we're talking about schools. I'll leave the Florida and Texas conversation out of this one and bring it back to Indiana. Is Governor Eric Holcomb making a mistake by not issuing a new mask mandate here in Indiana? Jennifer.
No, I think he's doing exactly what he should be doing. Look, we now have a lot more information than we had a year ago, and we're operating on that. Number one, we have a vaccine. So for anyone who is concerned, they can get vaccinated. It is available. It is all over the state. It is free. It is easy to get. And so that's the number one way to protect yourself. Hoosiers now have the right and the ability to do that at any given moment. Other decisions, I think, need to be left up to local entities and individual organizations to decide for themselves what they want to do with regard to masks. People have the choice, again, to be vaccinated and to wear a mask and make that choice. It's an individual responsibility and a choice that they can make.
Less than a minute left. Brian, I'll get your response on this. Is the governor making a mistake?
Well, really what we need is for the governor, along with other Republicans, to be consistent when it comes to pushing for Hoosiers to get vaccinated. And we're not hearing a consistent message from Republicans. We've got Republican politicians. We've got Republican politicians that are not actually telling people they've been vaccinated, like Congressman Jim Banks, for example. When reporters ask him, have you been vaccinated? He won't even tell anybody. Oh, I'm not going to comment on that. Well, the problem with Republicans is they're actually saying, well, I don't know, leave it up to, for you to decide. Well, we Democrats believe in freedom, but you got to have freedom with responsibility. And we're all in this together as Hoosiers and as Americans. And we need for the Republican leadership to be consistent with pushing for Hoosiers to be vaccinated. Our vaccination rate is like 50%.
It's a conversation that keeps on going, guys.
That's not very good.
All right,
not very good.
Right. Let's leave it there. Brian, Jennifer, always good to see you. Thank you for joining us. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics on this Sunday. We'll be back here next Sunday morning, 9:30. Also, you can always find our brand new All Indiana Politics podcast. It's part of the All Indiana Podcast Network at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.